Hi, my name's Moonpie and I hope you're having a fantastic day. You may have seen my video that talks about my concerns with the upcoming Battlefield 2042 title, and although I was fairly pessimistic, it's not all doom and gloom. The developers have got some really interesting ideas which could lead to Battlefield 2042 being one of the best Battlefield games yet. In this video, I'll be taking a look at some of the things the devs are introducing and breaking down what it means for the game. One of the first things we all heard about was the increase in server size from 32v32 to 64v64, representing a total of 128 players in one server. I feel this was largely done to push the technological barrier and match the competition provided by similar titles. Now, the impacts of this decision are obviously dependent on the balancing of the maps available to players. Like, try to imagine the absolute chaos of 128 players on a map like Underground, Lockers, Devastation, or Merida. You basically wouldn't be able to move without getting blown up. As we all know, in response to the increase in players in a server, map sizes have also increased, in some instances by a dramatic amount. In the graphic on screen, many of the maps being offered by 2042 are going to be huge, but bigger isn't always necessarily better. A concern I have with such large map sizes is the actual creation and balancing of the maps. Battlefield 5's Devastation map, for example, reportedly took several months to create and balance, meaning that with Battlefield 5's rushed release schedule, that a number of the other maps did not receive the same level of detail and polish that Devastation did. For 2042's maps, which are significantly larger, designing them in such a way that maintains a suitable flow of battle as well as maintaining balance for both sides has presumably been a significant undertaking. Now, it's also important to note that each of the maps is going to be broken down into a number of sectors, all of which function individually, all having their own set of objectives. Depending on the level of segregation between these sectors, you might not ever really be able to visualize a scale of 64 versus 64 player combat. So, whilst I have some concerns with the overall scale of the maps, if the developers are able to appropriately balance them, they could contribute to an overall awesome experience. Now, obviously, in a first-person shooter, guns are important. Really important. Until we get our hands on the game, it'll be hard to determine how the guns actually feel and play. Time to kill and the overall skill ceiling of gunplay represents some of the core functionality of the overall enjoyment of a game, and it can make or break the success of the game. I personally feel that Battlefield has made progress in its gunplay over the various iterations of the games, so I'm optimistic about how the guns will feel and perform in the actual game. In previous Battlefields though, specific classes of guns like SMGs, assault rifles, and snipers were tied to specific classes, but in 2042 that's not going to be the case. Instead, you can pick any gun and combine it with any gadget, something unheard of in Battlefield, and something that'll have an interesting impact on the balance of the game. I immediately consider the implications of versing things like vehicles. Is the norm going to be everyone carrying around a rocket launcher? Will this drastically reduce the impact that vehicles will have on the game? Or will it be balanced around the fact that everyone could have a rocket launcher? It'll be interesting to see how being able to pair any gun and gadget will impact the balance of the game. But I think it's a step in the right direction for Battlefield if they're able to appropriately balance the guns and the general effectiveness of the gadgets. Now, whilst all guns and gadgets can be paired together, an interesting addition to Battlefield are specialists, who are basically playable soldiers who have a unique gadget and passive abilities. This includes stuff like grappling hooks, sentry turrets, and recon drones. The game will release with 10 specialists on launch, and they will release one specialist quarterly with each new season. I assume the transition to this particular model is to attempt to replicate the success of games like Warzone and Rainbow Six, which routinely release new characters. This helps to sustain their live service model, something attempted and failed in Battlefield 5. Battlefield 5's live service model was largely based on a rudimentary battle pass in conjunction with character and weapon skins. 2042's adoption of specialists will help to push MTX and the live service model to the next level, something that will hopefully coincide with a successful live service model that exists until the next Battlefield comes out in years' time. Now, one of the biggest issues for a small region like OCE is the general lack of available servers to join. On a given night in Battlefield 5, there's typically only 1 or 2 servers that are not hardcore or gate-kept by power-hungry admins. This obviously doesn't bode well for most of the community, meaning people typically end up leaving to play other games. This issue will hopefully be resolved through the introduction of Crossplay in 2042, basically allowing console and PC players to play together. Now, a concern with this is the aiming advantage that PC players get through the use of keyboard and mouse. To compensate, console players are given aim assist that help them to match the precision offered by PC players. Now, in games that have recently released with crossplay, the aim assist was extremely strong to the extent that PC players were not able to compete with console players. So it'll be important for the developers of 2042 to appropriately balance the aim assist offered to console players. Too strong and PC players will turn off crossplay. Too weak and console players will turn off crossplay, which given the small nature of OCE could result in the server issue mentioned previously. On the topic of servers, another fantastic addition coming out with 2042 is Ripple Effect's Battlefield Builder. In Battlefield 5, server admins had fairly limited control outside of setting the map, game mode, and limiting weapons and vehicles. In 2042, this is all changing with the highest level of customization ever given to server admins and modders. Now, servers will have the typical knobs and dials to adjust stats, but not only is everything from 2042 available, but there will also be content from Battlefield 1942, Bad Company 2, and Battlefield 3. All models from these games have been remastered for 2042, and it doesn't just stop with the knobs and dials. Admins will have access to a logic editor. This will allow them to write and execute scripts for the game itself. Now, all the details are not known about this yet, but this will take the Battlefield experience to the next level. Now, there's no mention of it, but I assume this will be accompanied by a server balancer, something completely lacking from Battlefield 5. It's also important to note that Battlefield is not charging people for the maintenance of servers, so anybody can start up a server. Now, I mentioned before that 128 players on a map such as Operation Underground would be chaos, but do you actually want to see what it's like? Well, you can try. Do you want to fully heal after you kill someone? Done. Do you want to have a zombies game mode? Sure. Want a gun game mode? Easy. Do you want to see 2042's weather events on a Bad Company 2 map? Done. It is important to note that you won't be able to adjust the maps themselves, but besides that, the limitation of the logic editor really seems to be limited by the creativity of players. So it's going to be awesome to see what the community comes up with. Now, the final thing I'd like to talk about are cheaters. A few months ago, hackers gained access to the Frostbite source code. EA went on to say that it was for an older version of Frostbite not being used for 2042, but there's still concern it will enhance any cheats created for 2042. Regardless of the source code leak, hacks will eventually be created for the game, so it'll be interesting to see what the developers have done to try and tackle this. Battlefield 5 did not have any reliable anti-cheat software in place, so until hackers were banned by server admins, they were free to run around causing havoc. Now, whilst having server admins that could ban hackers is fantastic, an issue with server admins is that they typically ban players who killed them a lot, which now with persistent bans in 2042 could quickly reduce the servers that good players are actually able to play on. This is further compounded by the issue I mentioned before for smaller regions like OCE. Now, whilst many people have suggested the use of IP and hardware bans, it's not overly complicated for people to overcome bans on either of these, which really points to the developers having to make use of a hidden detection program. Now, I'm not entirely sure what the developer has planned, but I'm really hoping they'll have something that'll help combat the abundance of hackers we'll otherwise see in games. So there you go, that basically sums up my thoughts on what we currently know for 2042. I think there's a lot to be excited about, but like I mentioned in my previous video that covered my concerns, I think getting too hyped will set yourself up to get burned. So what are your thoughts on what I've covered? Do you agree or disagree with what I've said? Let me know in the comments. Now feel free to come and check me out on Twitch, link is in the description, and whatever the case, that'll be me for now, so I'll see you again next time. Bye.